Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for USports football. Me and Tom are back on the mics following an electric conference championship weekend of games. We now have our Mitchell and UTEC Bowl participants ready. We'll take you through all the conference championships that got us here and go through some of the all-stars and major award winners as well. But first, Tom, how the heck are you doing on a snowy Sunday afternoon?
I'm doing so well. I mean, considering the fact that we could have had Friday's rainstorm or Sunday's snowstorm, and instead we had the most beautiful day on Saturday in Waterloo to watch Queens take on and win their first Yates Cup since 2009. I am very, very thankful that we are not outside in what is happening right now.
It was a cold one. I'm not going to pull punches on that. I probably could have come more prepared, but nonetheless, it was an awesome event. It was awesome being there with you and your pops and seeing everyone there. Getting to meet Danny Brannigan. Are you kidding me?
I have to say, easily one of my favorite moments of the entire day was turning to you and saying, "Hey, Zach and Jack, meet Danny Brannigan." The face that you had, holy shit, hi. It was perfect.
Only topped by then me telling my dad later on, I met him and he's like, Danny Brannigan, great football player he was. Great football player he was. And honestly, possibly the good luck charm when it comes for picking up a win against Coach Falls, but we'll get into that game. Let's start with the All-Stars major award winners. Then we'll go into our players of the week, transitioning into our breakdown of the Yates Hardy Loney Dussault Cup, the inaugural Dussault Cup that I wish I looked this up, but I feel like had to have had more points than any Laval Montreal game ever has put us through. But let's start in the OUA with our major award winners. We'll only do the All-Stars for the OUA, but we'll cover all of the major award winners. So starting with the OUA major award winners, most of this is very well known at this point. We'll go through it one by one and have some more commentary after we get through it. Your MVP for the year, wide receiver for the Laurier Golden Hawks, Ethan Jordan. Outstanding stand-up defensive player, also from the Golden Hawks, Jesse Wilkins. Lineman of the year, our guy, Western Mustangs, Eric Anderson. Norm Marshall Award for Rookie of the Year, also hailing from the Western Mustangs, Jackson McKay. The Russ Jackson Award goes to Carleton Ravens, Luigi Zagaria, and the Bernie Curtis Championship of EDI goes to Mikhail Nemhart out of the Ottawa Gigi's program. The David Tuffy Knight Award for Coach of the Year goes to Michael Falds from the Laurier Golden Hawks for not just the second time in a row, but is this his three-peat, Tom?
It's the three-peat.
Doggone it. Assistant Coach of the Year goes to Rob McMurrin from the Waterloo Warriors, and the Ken Green Official Award of Merit goes to Adam Hinks, who was calling the Yates Cup that we were in the house for. Tom, before we go through the All-Stars, or maybe we just push ahead, but any commentary firstly on the major award winners for the OUA?
Well, I know that there was a couple of, let's say, contentious opinions about some of the award winners. First and foremost, I think a lot of people were talking about Ethan Dolby versus Ethan Jordan for that OUA MVP. And while certainly Dolby's numbers have been outstanding in that year, we've talked about this previously. I think a big portion of that is the fact that he was given a lot of those opportunities to run the ball. You know, they had Jack Kelly in there as well, but he's not nearly getting the bulk of the carries that Ethan is. And because of that combination with the fact that he is a phenomenal running back, he puts up great numbers. But you know, there's been a lot of people, including us, that have said if you give a Keon Edwards that type of carries, if you gave an Edward Winati, if you gave a Keanu Yazbek exclusively, you get all of the carries here, you'd probably see something similar from that regard, and almost, you know, works something as a deficit similar to Ethan Jordan last year. You know, Ethan Jordan had one of the greatest quarterbacks ever throwing him the ball. Ethan Dolby had one of the greatest offensive lines out front blocking for him, so that's a bit of a knock on him as well from that regard. If you want to say that that's a knock, if you know what I mean.
Of course, and an O-line spearheaded by, I think, back-to-back, and maybe there was a three-peat as well. Wouldn't be surprised, back-to-back JP Metros Award winner in Eric Anderson. To your point as well, obviously, Ethan Jordan doesn't get those numbers without someone getting him the ball, but Eric Anderson winning the JP Metros also was an award that heralded quite a bit of enthusiasm, let's call it, in the online sphere by none other than probably one of the key runners-up for this award as well.
Yeah, Braxton Johnson at Windsor had a few things to say, was pretty fired up about that. And you know what? He's got a pretty solid case in terms of why he felt he should be that lineman of the year. 23 and a half total tackles on the year, 8.5 sacks at leads the entirety of U Sports in individual sacks as an interior D lineman. That's incredible. Followed up by 10 and a half tackles for loss, a forced fumble, and two fumble recoveries. So if there is going to be a battle between the two of them, certainly would be between the two, both Braxton Johnson and Eric Anderson. But I know we might be biased. He's our guy. But when you see the development that Eric Anderson has consistently here, the domination that he shows on an offensive line that has always got all-star capabilities to be the clear-cut best one of them, no matter what, says a lot about who Eric Anderson is. But certainly Braxton Johnson was right up there, I have to imagine, in terms of the voting. And once again, we don't get a vote or a say in this.
No, we don't. No, well, we'll leave that aside for another conversation. The last one that I think will pair in nicely when we get to talking about the Yates Cup is Jesse Wilkins winning this award if Justin Pace is playing a full 8-game schedule.
I mean, there's a reason why you and I both said preseason is going to be Justin Pace because of the capabilities that he has. And I mean, if there's one way to showcase why you should have been at least in the contention for that role, it's by going out and doing what you did in the Yates Cup and having the monster game on the biggest stage that the OUA has. So that's more so of a what if kind of scenario here, but certainly I think Pace showcases every time he steps on the field why he is easily one of the best defenders that we have in U Sports.
And like no shot at all at Jesse Wilkins' Flaherty. Like
No.
he was one of the premier defenders in the country this year. And, depending on which numbers you look at, you might like give Windsor the nod for the best defense in the conference. You might give it to Queens, but Laurier certainly has as strong an argument as any of those three teams. It's going to be one of them. And at a certain point, you just come down to, well, much like perhaps the way that I'm thinking about when Daniel Valente Jr. won it for Western a few years back. Not that he wasn't a phenomenal safety as well, but it's like, okay, like clear-cut best defense in the league. And who kind of captains the ship and is also like a remarkable player in there, right? It's like there's nothing wrong with that pick at all when their defense as a whole is as good as they are. We always go back to this piece that we somehow don't talk enough about the fact Hardner Dollywall goes out so early in the season. They're missing him, and it falls on a guy like Wilkins Flaherty, where perhaps, Dollywall would have been that kind of captain of that like veteran presence on there. So again, I don't really think taken away from it, but given if you're just going to project out based on what Pace was doing when the suspension happened, I think it's pretty clear he takes that one home for the exact same reason, the clear-cut best guy on arguably the best defense. But he still ended up picking himself up an all-star bid, second team though it was. So let's run through those award winners quick, fast, and maybe have a little bit of commentary here and there. Your first team OUA All-Stars quarterback, Cal Wither. Running backs, Ethan Dolby and Jared Kasari. Receivers, Ethan Jordan, Chris Joseph, Nathan Falcone, and Tristan Reddy. Fullback, tight end, H-back, Sebastian Parcelitis. At center, Cody Blackshaw. Offensive tackles, Eric Anderson and Nicholas Henning. Offensive guards, Josh Rietfeld and Keegan O'Neill. On defense, at the defensive tackle positions, you have Max von Muhldorfer and Braxton Johnson. At defensive ends, Ahmad Taylor and Mateo LaQuintana. Your linebacking core is Jesse Wilkins, Jackson Brashear, and Michael Omaseni. Your defensive secondary on the first team is John Korskaden at free safety. Your halfbacks are Jahari Hastings and Ashton Miller-Melanson. At cornerback, you have Malik Cote and Istvan Asibo-Dodsi. Your special teams unit has Michael Horvat at punter, Brady Litzder at kicker, and returning Tayshawn Jackson with Laomi Ojutulayo as the rush cover. Should I just go quick through the second teams and then we can do a couple? Perfect. We'll go right into it. Your second team OUA All-Stars at quarterback, Alex Vreeken. Your running backs are Waby Mambo and Tayshawn Jackson. At receiver, Ryan Hughes, Seth Robertson, Noah Avery, and Jake Oseen. Your fullback tight end, H-back is Mateo Tuioti. Your offensive line has center Philippe Cote, offensive tackle Spencer Walsh and Reed Cloutier, and offensive guards Mitchell Schretchinger and Brett Miller. rookie Brett Miller, mind you. The defense on the second team is Marcus Tenney and Riley Hildebrand at the defensive tackle positions with Oliver Jackson and rookie Christian Chukwali at the defensive end spots. Your linebacking core is Xavier Malone, Javon Jacobson, and Justin Pace. Your defensive secondary has Harrison Daly at free safety, Patrick Cumberbatch and Ethan John at your halfbacks, with Jared Seaway and Denny Ferdinand at the corner spots. Your special teams units has Nathan Walker at punter, Michael Horvath at kicker, Denny Ferdinand as the returner, and DJ Ryan as your rush cover. Those are your first and second team OUA All-Star Award winners. Tom.
I mean, first off, you imagine, hey, what if all of these people played on the same team together? What a linebacking core Wilkins, Flaherty, Brashear, and Omaseni would be. My God. Obviously, everybody on here, so some of the very best across the OUA that we have is why they're all-stars, but that linebacking crew in particular here is just outstanding. I mean, you look at the rest of the picks here, I think it is worth noting if there is going to be one area I'm sure there's some people that were miffed about. I mean, you have the number one passing offense in the OUA doesn't have a quarterback on this list at all. And
I'm making a face for people listening. I'm making a face right now.
I agree with that fact because Cal Wither and Alex Vreekin were outstanding this entire year. But if there is going to be anybody who says anything, I would imagine that would be something. But
please do. Sorry, if it is quickly. We're talking about U of T right now. U of T, please do. Go ahead. Please say something to the effect that you should have had Scott Barnett ahead of one of these two quarterbacks. I am waiting with bated breath upon hearing that take. Sorry, Tom, to interrupt you.
No, that's all good. But no, you look at the entirety of this list here. I agree with, I think, everything on here, even how good I think a lot of these guys are. Very excited for the amount of rookies that we had, even though it was just the two that you had on the second team. The fact that they made second team and weren't just relegated to the all rookie team, I think says a lot about some of the new guys that are coming up. Why I'm so excited personally for my Marauder ties with Christian Chukwali, what he's going to be doing, and Brett Miller being one of the focal points on that Windsor offensive line. He is a load, and when he's got mitts on you, you're not going anywhere. So pretty awesome to see those guys get recognized along with everybody else on this list.
Yeah, I really don't have too many notes on it. At first, when John Corskadden was listed as the first team free safety, and obviously that defensive secondary is so strong that it's kind of like I almost would have thought like if you could do it positionlessly, and that's obviously a silly idea because like it's not a positionless group, but like there's part of me that like Tanasi Keegan Vanek on here, for example, is like feels like astounding. Now, obviously, when you look at those guys at half, including his teammate in Ashton Miller, Melanson, Jahari Hastings, and then seeing on the second team with Patrick Cumberbatch, Ethan John, like I don't know who you put in there. And there was the part of me of being like, of course, Scott had that major game against U of T, and how much did that sort of inflate people's impression? But just watching him in that Yates Cup yesterday with like an especially key nine to be able to say like, all right, dude, you got labeled the best in the OUA right now. Let's see you hold it down. He had some major plays. We'll get to that later on. Really no other notes about it. Really strong list. Obviously, we've been playing around with a few content ideas for the offseason of doing variations of drafted teams in a way. So just seeing these lists makes me giddy for that prospect. Let's, and just quickly to go through, they also announced the all-rookie team, just to go through those names quickly. Now, what was interesting about this before we get into it was that they've done different versions of the all-rookie team, different variations of this over the years, and they seem to have settled on just every team gets somebody. But it's funny that there's 10 players listed. The one that's not there is Laurier. But as we discussed it and went through the names, we're like, I don't really know who else you put out there. In talking with Jack Moore, I believe it was, the interesting piece is that they allow you to have up to that second year of academic eligibility, given that a lot of people don't get their first shot on the field until maybe that second year. But nonetheless, your all-rookie team is as follow: from the Western Mustangs, defensive back Jackson McKay; from the Guelph Griffins, defensive lineman Andre Thompson; from the Windsor Lancers, offensive guard Brett Miller; from the McMaster Marauders, defensive end Christian Chukwali. From the Waterloo Warriors, kicker punter Evan Astolfo. From the Ottawa GGs, receiver Emile Gregoire. Did not know he was so young. That is awesome for that receiving core there. From the Carleton Ravens, fullback Arthur Bedard. From the York Lions, defensive back Jack Roberts. From the Queens Golden Gales, defensive lineman Carter Martin. And from the U of T Varsity Blues, halfback Jack Donahue. Again, we went through the exercise already. I don't think it makes for good air to go through like, well, who would have been from Laurier? I really just don't think anyone makes the cut per se. But any other like notes on this one? Your guy Astolfo making the list. That seemed like a no doubter based on the exciting game winner he had week 2. Any other thoughts, generally speaking?
Yeah, just on Astolfo, initially I thought that he was going to be a lock for kicking on the first or second team, but he had missed a few. His accuracy wasn't the greatest. Obviously, in the biggest moments, he came through in the clutch, so that gives something, but he's got a phenomenal career ahead of him. I am very excited for Astolfo, and yeah, like you mentioned, did not realize Emile Gregoire was a rookie, or maybe in that first year playing, second year academic eligibility, whatever that means. But the fact that they've got somebody like him young on that receiving core is very exciting for GG fans.
To have learned under a guy like Noah Avery, if Noah's back for another year, so many other young guys in that mix. Again, an Ottawa offense that should be much better than what they were putting out this year. The only last thing I want to highlight, and I just want to give a shout out and credit to our guy in Dakota Vine for dropping this line on me when we were hanging out. We were reminiscing on, well, a number of things, including how Dakota and I interviewed Evan Hillock during the pandemic before he even stepped foot into Western's locker room as an official Western Mustang to talk about him making the switch from Guelph to Western. And Dakota drops the line on me for a guy who made the switch to Guelph to Western to then lose in his final game to a guy in Andre Thompson who made the switch to Western to Guelph. Love you forever, Evan. Love you as well, Andre Thompson. There was just a beautiful poetry in that one as well. Let's move on to our major award winners from the other conferences. Let's go out to the AUS, where most outstanding player, now reigning MVP or back-to-back MVP of the AUS is the Bishop Gators' own Justin Quirion. Rookie of the Year, Mathieu Bellevance of the Bishop Gators as well. The outstanding defensive player of the year goes to Owen Watrick from the St. FX X-Men. For outstanding lineman of the year, Caleb Allaby from the St. Mary's Huskies takes that one home. Student Athlete Community Service Award goes to Cameron Brown of the St. Mary's Huskies. The Russ Jackson nominee is Cameron. Yeah, of course. They just called it a little differently there at the start. Your coach of the year is Steve Samara of the St. Mary's Huskies. Assistant coach of the year goes to Bryce Fisher of the St. Mary's X-Men, and that is all they wrote on that one. Tom, probably the MVP piece is the part that's the most juicy of the mix here. What notes do you have about this group of award winners?
Yeah, certainly when we took into effect that the fact that Silas is now the all-time leading passer in the AUS history, passing Larry Justanis earlier this year, I thought that was going to be a huge aspect of what this award potentially could be. But when you look at some of the stats on the year, I think it does paint a bit of a picture. 163 for 269, that's Silas, for 60% completion rating, averaging 219 yards passing per game, 6 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, versus Quirion, 62% completion rating, averaging 244 in the air, 15 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. So when you look at some of those back to back, when you look at, there's a lot of what does an MVP actually mean? Is it somebody who is more important to the offense, more important to the team, or whatever that case is? I think Quirion demonstrated that when he's firing on all cylinders, that's when Bishops does really well. And if you can contain him, that's where they really seem to struggle here. So I looking at the stats, and with that in mind, I'm not mad at the fact that Quirion wins this one. He certainly deserves it.
Yeah, I think when you look at it like that, as it's often a quarterback award, it wasn't going to be Shibley. And as you highlighted, it wasn't Fagnon's best year. The record-breakingness of it all we thought may have carried enough weight. This one goes out to, our Ken Wallers of the world out there, though. Like, when's the last time? Because part of me is just thinking, like, with how outstanding St. Mary's has been on defense all year long, kind of irrespective of conference, maybe I'm missing something more recently. Obviously, they honor top stand-up defensive players as well, but where you might just say, look, the best player, most outstanding player in this whole league was a defensive guy, whether it's a guy like Callan Edwards or Ryan Butler, someone on that St. Mary's defense. But anyways, I'm curious what kind of precedent there even is to begin with that, because obviously it is kind of that offensive player of the year award. Let's take a look quickly at the RSCQ awards. The Heck Crichton nominee, most outstanding player, goes to Q quarterback from Laval, Arnaud Desjardins. Most outstanding defensive player, the President's Trophy nominee, goes to his teammate and Justin Cloutier. Most outstanding lineman goes to Alessandro Diafo of the Montreal Carabins. Rookie of the year goes to Pepe Gonzalez from Montreal, of course, their quarterback. Russ Jackson Award winner goes to Isaac Pepin, defensive back out of Concordia. Coach of the year goes to Glenn Constantin out of Laval. Wonder how many of those he's racked up now. Offensive rookie of the year, and this is so exciting because this didn't click for me earlier, goes to McGill's running back, Jerry Momo. Defensive rookie of the year, that's an interesting little spin they put in there as well, goes to Benjamin McDougall, defensive lineman out of Concordia. They even have a return specialist of the year, which goes to Billy Jonas Pernier for Laval. And then the volunteer assistant coach of the year goes to Denis Boisclair from the Montreal Carabins. Super exciting to think about Jerry Momo as a rookie. There's some other news that, again, might be something we talk later about possible improvements to McGill. I don't know if there's anything on that bone that we want to sort of pull apart yet. We'll maybe say it for another time. I'll leave that up to your discretion. But nonetheless, a great list of names. What catches your attention?
Well, I mean, you look at Arnaud Desjardins winning yet another outstanding player award. He certainly deserves it with what he was been able to do. Although near the end of the year, he did see a little bit of, I don't know what the right word is here, but like he was on the cusp of breaking the touchdown passing record for a number of weeks, and just couldn't seem to get it done after like week 4 or 5 or something along those lines. So that was a little interesting there. Pepe Gonzalez, I'm sure, probably had a great case to win that as well if he wasn't already a rookie and automatically going to win that award. So I think that's interesting. Justin Cloutier, linebacker, he's the same guy who won Rookie of the Year a few years ago for all of USports when Ethan Gregorczyk was up for that. So no surprise why he's there. He's an outstanding player. And then obviously, like you mentioned, I mean, the fact that Jerry Momo is a first-year player and what he was able to do this year is really outstanding. McGill Redbird fans, you got to be really excited for the offense at least. Let's see if that defense can get shored up a little bit.
Well, let's finish up with our CanWest Major Award winners, and starting off with the Player of the Year. Going to your guy, number 2 in green for the Saskatchewan Huskies. Go Dogs, your boy, in Daniel Weeb. Joining him as the outstanding lineman is Charlie Parks. Oh, pardon me. Oh, yeah, so Charlie Parks, defensive lineman there. Outstanding defensive player. It keeps going for the Dogs. Again, one of your guys, Mr. Seth Hundaby, patrolling the linebackers for Rookie of the Year. Really, again, exciting pick here about the future for the Dinos. Wide receiver Zion Grant really took notice early on for the Dinos this year. For the Russ Jackson Award nominee, it goes to Chevy Thomas of the Golden Bears, the Alberta Golden Bears. Coach of the Year goes to Saskatchewan Huskies, Scott Flory. And the volunteer assistant coach of the year goes to run game coordinator, running backs coach for Regina in Dwayne Mason. I believe, those are your CanWest Major Award winners. Tom, take it away.
Yeah, when you can look at a team like Saskatchewan, who has arguably one of the best quarterbacks that we have in USports in Anton Ammonrood, and he goes out and is injured, to still see the production out of the receiving core, and specifically Daniel Weeb, showcases how important he is to the entirety of that team. He was always going to have big numbers, but the fact that Jake Farrell in his first year starting or really being involved in the offense can say, you know what, even if I'm not 100% on my reads yet, even if I don't fully understand defensive yet, and I'm just speaking for him, he could have all of that. But to know that you have a guy like Daniel Weeb out in the wings to say, you know what, I'm going to throw this ball up, and 9 times out of 10, he's going to come down with it. That's just a huge testament to who he is, the work ethic that he puts in, and the unbelievable player that he is. You want to talk about, we were this close to going 4 for 4 on offensive linemen being lineman of the year. Charlie Parks had to just ruin that. But no, he's an incredible player as well for these Huskies. And obviously with Seth Hundaby in behind him as well, this is why Saskatchewan has been so good, is because they have an outstanding offense with great defensive players in behind them. And of course, because of all of that, Scott Flory gets the coach of the year. First time that Saskatchewan has only had one loss in the season since 2022, when Mason Nias was at the helm and they made it out to the Yates Cup, if I remember correctly. So this is shaping up to be a very successful year for the Huskies. Obviously, they're going to have a very big challenge coming up ahead, but we'll break down just who that is in another podcast. We still got to get to the games themselves.
We'll save maybe our conversation for who will take home the national awards when we preview or review one way or the other, leading into the Mitchell and the UTEC. We're coming out of it one way or the other. Let's jump into the action. Before we do, let's give out a little bit of our own hardware for our offensive, defensive, special teams players of the week with the 4 games remaining. And also for a few other reasons, based on the Yates Cup itself, we decided to go C to C on our awards here. So let's start off with the Hardy Cup in terms of where we're going, Tom, for our offensive player of the week.
Yeah, I got to give it to Jake Farrell. What he's been able to do in this offense since taking over from Anton Ammonrood has been impressive, but especially in this game in the biggest moments. 25 for 35, 356 passing yards, 2 touchdowns to no interceptions. Again, the effect of Mason Nias on these quarterbacks is showing. Being smart with the football, what he's able to do. A number of those passes going to Riker Frank because he's not pushing it down the field. I think he's certainly earned the offensive player of the week.
I love that you brought up how many times he was dumping it off to Frank, or sometimes not even just dumping it off, but using him in that passing attack. I'll save further comments on what I liked about that a little bit later. But yes, very well deserving. Let's take our talents to the Yates for defensive player, and not just defensive player of the week. This young man, your guy, was also named the Yates Cup MVP. Tom, talk about number 44 for the Tricolors, Justin Pace.
Man, I cannot be happier for this young man winning the MVP for the Yates Cup, and certainly going to be our defensive player of the week. 7.5 total tackles, 1 fumble recovery, 1 pick six, and a pass breakup. He was all over the field here. And you want to talk about, especially for young players, young linebackers, even just any position. If you want to be really effective, if you want to have that extra little bit and make a difference, just be around the football. You see, even when Pace wasn't actively making the tackle, he's right next to whoever is, and that's where that fumble recovery, that pick six comes from, is because he's actively in the play, even if he's not making said play. So an outstanding job, and he gets our defensive player of the week.
And let's head back to the Hardy Cup to give out our special teams player of the week. Tom, take us through the day young Lucas Scott had, not just kicking the ball, but also with arguably the most crucial punt return of the whole weekend.
Yeah, Lucas Scott, really impressive. 4 for 4 in his field goals, 1 for 1 on his extra points for 13 total points. But just as you mentioned here, he does get credited with 1 punt return, and that's because they put him way back when Regina's down by just 1 point. They go to punt the ball to try to get the Rouge, and they put Saskatchewan puts their own kicker in behind. He comes up. The punt doesn't exactly make it to the end zone, but he fields it on the 5-yard line, call it, and the game is over. The Dogs win. So an outstanding job by Lucas Scott. He gets our special teams player of the week.
That's how you do it, Western. That's how you do it, boys. That was mean. But it's Western, so we're allowed to be a little mean. Let's go to the Yates Cup, Tom, that we were in the house with. Final score in this game. I'm sorry, Western. That one was rough. Final score in this game: the Queens Golden Gales 30, the Laurier Golden Hawks 27. Tom, this was a game that in the first half it's Queens 27, Laurier 3. The second half it's Laurier 24 and Queens 3. Those crucial 3 points being the difference in this one. Truly a tale of two halves. A defensive outing in the first half by the Queens Golden Gales that was arguably unprecedented, and an outing by Cal Wither that, again, if you're looking at the numbers, you're going to be grossly misled in just to what went down in this game, because so many of those turnovers were just the unfortunate bounces here and there that then worked out in Queens' favor. So many things to talk about in this game. Tale of two halves, the turnovers in the first half, the comeback by Laurier, the near comeback. What are your first thoughts, your first impressions from being in the house for Queens picking up their first Yates in 16 years?
One of, if not the greatest defensive performance I think I have ever seen live, especially in that first half of that Yates Cup. I have never seen such domination from a secondary in particular as I saw there. As you mentioned, a lot of those, at least three, maybe two, three of those interceptions were not Cal Wither's fault. One of the best plays that I think I saw that I think is actually credited as a catch and a fumble rather than a pure interception. But Ryan Hughes catches the ball, and he's a phenomenal receiver. He's not catching the ball, like he's got it close to his chest. Jared Seaway comes and punches the ball out perfectly right into the arms of Justin Pace, and that's where he gets his fumble recovery that's there. And it just, like, it textbook defensive back play. I mean, even at the very end of that, we were speaking to some folks who had a better vantage point than we did on the final play of the game. And John Korskaden perfectly broke up that pass to Laomi in the dying seconds here that Laurier had on offense. No, like they said, no, it wasn't pass interference. He was in the perfect position. Keegan Vanek and Ashton Miller-Malonza. Like, it's also insane. If I told you that Queens was going to get 4 interceptions and Ashton Miller-Merlanson was not going to get one of them, I think you would have called me insane. But still, an unbelievable performance from those guys in the back end, what they were able to do. Not to mention the fellas up front. Of course, and I don't want to break down the entire thing here, but this is so incredible for Queens. I'm so happy for this entire team, especially in Coach Steve Snyder. You know, we had talked about it previously. This stint that he has been on since the COVID years to now is collectively the most successful that Queens has been, in that they may not have won previously in Yates Cups, but they have been to Yates Cups and they had successful seasons and being over 500. And now that's finally capped with a Yates Cup victory in that setting, and finally getting that sense and bringing that back to Queens. That's got to be such an incredible feeling for him and the rest of this coaching staff, including your boy Nez.
Oh, so happy for my guy. So happy. You know, I mean, and the thing that we were talking about around halftime, when, you know, obviously things are heavily swinging towards Queen's side of things, of, you know, if this holds out, what's going to be an interesting thing to reflect on as far as the halfway point of the 2020s football, OUA football, you know, lore, is that both Laurier and you'll have Western, who will be 3-1 in Yates Cups, and then Laurier and Queens, who are 1-2 apiece. Because again, let's not forget, despite what people want to talk about in terms of the COVID season, the OUA East and West, and yeah, the OUA West being way harder than the OUA East, but put that aside, Queens starts off the decade being in 2 Yates Cups, hosting one of them as well. They get back to the mountaintop, you know, obviously with me and Nez joke, and of course, and Charlie Taggart joking about, you know, 10 years ago, us winning that Yates in Guelph, 10 years now, Nez and Taggart winning again. There's also that piece too of, and I have you to blame for this as well, our journey to the Yates Cup championship involved losing twice before then. So that sort of symmetry as well from that standpoint of like a team that really had to climb to the mountaintop, got knocked down twice. It seems like maybe if Western's a bit vulnerable and maybe now Queens has the chance to become the team. Oh no, Laurier slid in and is now all of a sudden with the Taylor Elgersma years, with the ascension of all the skill guys they have, this defense being what it is and everything. So it's like, wow, did Queens miss their chance when Western became a little bit vulnerable, in this past year? And it looks like it's Laurier's to lose, and it's the way it ends up going. Now, arguably, this is a question I maybe thought to ask towards the end of our breakdown, but we're talking to some folks as we're leaving, and the sort of pessimistic take, if you will. I hate to have only scratched the surface on all the great things we need to talk about with what Queens did on this day and just how incredible of a day it was in general, a game it was especially. But the sort of pessimistic take that came out from one or two folks we said is that, well, you had 5 turnovers in the first half. And you look at the numbers offensively, they're not mind-boggling. And I'm just going to interrupt my own take. Again, when your defense sets you up with major, plus field position, you don't need a huge day from your offense. But you get 5 turnovers in the first half, and you only hold on to win by 3 points at the end. Is that spell disaster for Queens going into a national semifinal game against, a Huskies team that we'll talk about shortly, didn't look the sharpest themselves at times. Now, I want to just state for the record, I very much have things to say to undermine that take as well. But let me pass that take to you to respond to in terms of, coming out of this. I mean, for starters, you win a championship, you never have to say sorry. That's for starters. But to that take in general, as far as like, Queens had, however many, you play this game back 100 times. Do they come away with 5 turnovers the way they did in this game? Who knows? But we heard a bit of that pessimism a few times. What's sort of your response to that notion that like they lucked out and they still barely hung on?
I don't agree with that whatsoever. I think that both of these, the takes that people are trying to make, in my mind, are the reasons why Queens and Laurier were there to begin with. Like, Laurier is a phenomenal team, and so is Queens. Like, this idea of like, oh, well, Queens only puts up 240 yards of total offense. Exactly like you mentioned, those 5 turnovers had them in Laurier territory a lot of times. So when they're going in and scoring touchdowns on a drive that's going to take you like 30 yards, of course your numbers aren't going to look like that. But the stats, once we've said this so many times, the stats do not tell a story. It's watching the game and the performance. I've been very tough on Alex Vreeken for a little while. And when you look at the stats, 16 for 27, 169, and 1 touchdown, you think, oh, whatever, that's not a great game. That was one of the most impressive performances I've seen by a quarterback, in the fact that he's being smart with the football. He was not putting it up in dangerous positions for Laurier to take it away. And he was so elusive. The Laurier gets credited with 1 sack. They probably should have had 5 or 6 because of the pressure that's there. He's able to spin away from guys like Mateo LaQuintana, like Marcus Tenney, guys who are known for getting after the quarterback. His elusiveness and the legs that he has, his ability to run, were on full display, and he was incredible every single time he had the ball in his hand. So again, the stats only tell so much of the story here. And a very similar side of that, Jared Kasari held to just 61 yards of rushing. Every one of those yards that he has came in a pivotal moment. The times where he was just putting his head down and running forward to gain a few extra yards to seal the game away on a 3rd and 3, the first time that they had really gone for it in the fourth quarter. Like, that's what really speaks to me. The stats don't tell the story here. This was such an incredible victory, one of the best that Queens has had in a very long time. And obviously it's the Yates Cup and they haven't won it in 16 years, whatever. But just looking at this game from the game itself, not taking into the fact that this was the Yates Cup or anything, the game and the performance here was just incredible in all 3 facets for Queens. They played a full, complete game.
Well, I'm going to steal your take really quick just to shout out to Nez, be like, brother, just put a proper rollout in at this point. Come on, man. The guy's great on the run. And as we detailed it, he's going up against the front 7 now with Saskatchewan. That's going to be, causing fits. And Tom didn't just say all those nice things because maybe Papa Vreeken told us that Mama Vreeken was going to kill us, but that's totally not why we're saying that now. Tom, let's talk about the trenches because realistically, like so much happened in this game that makes really focusing on any aspect of a football game as like this is where it swung one way or the other, overly simplistic. But the closest approach I think you could get to that, and I think it's what also like factors into some of those interceptions and some of those turnovers in general, was the game in the trenches going on. Now we came into this in partly why we were bullish on Laurier was thinking about, well, with what we saw from or not from what we saw, but from how banged up that we saw Johnson coming out of that Windsor game, and thinking about how Laurier, somewhat by proxy, as we talk to different coaches, including Coach Soria, without having EJ in there, it forces them to use Parcellitis a little bit, go into that two back and say, well, shoot, you're kind of forced to maybe run the ball a little more anyways. And Parcellitis, as we went through, is the best we have in the league at, turning those 2 foot splits between O linemen into 4 foot, just, parting gaps like the Red Sea for whether it's Quentin Scott or for Tayshawn Jackson. So we thought that there was a bit of, and that's on top of the fact, obviously, that Queen still has incredible linebackers, as we know. That job by the Queens front seven to minimize Laurier's rushing attack. And we always get caught up, going back to the Taylor years to now with Cal Wither, we always get caught up in the air show, and rightfully so. But just like how Tanner Nelms and Tayshawn Jackson were arguably the best 1-2 punch last year, Quentin Scott, Tayshawn Jackson have been right there amongst anyone. And you might put Windsor ahead, you put that Guelph rushing attack, Ethan Dolby. Again, it's right there amongst the best that we have so far, and how Queens, with, as we saw late in the game, a Johnson who was very much still laboring off of some of those injuries coming off of Windsor, having to come out for stints here and there. How Queens was able to just stifle the rushing attack early and often, I thought was so darn impressive, and also, again, credit to not just guys like Pace, but was it Jackson who got his hand up on one of those balls that ended up in the hands of maybe it was the Seaway one. Again, great job. Not to say terribly surprised given how good they've been all along, but the secondary came to play for sure. That front seven for Queens defensively balled out.
Yeah, they played unbelievably. And starting off with that defensive line in particular, I mean, you look at a guy like Cal Wither, and he has the capability to take over games and be really impressive. We've seen it the entirety of this year in key moments. But the way that you make him uncomfortable is take away all the time he has in the pocket. He's got to get that ball out as fast as possible, because you've got guys like Stephen Capay, and you've got guys like Oliver Jackson, who, like we have said, like weeks and weeks ago, is one of the best pure pass rushers that we have seen. Loved everything that we saw out of 52. He is truly incredible here, but also this was always going to be a hell of a game, especially for the boundary tackle in Delphin. This is, he's switched from defensive line to offensive line. He's an incredible athlete, but he's still a relatively new offensive lineman. And to go up against the quality of pass rushers that Queens has, this was always going to be a difficult day for him. And then you look at the other side, and your all-star in Spencer Walsh, and he goes down in, I believe, the first quarter. And then you have to put Daniel Crow out there, and then he goes down at one point. At one point in time, you put Josh Rietveld out at tackle, because you only have another guard to kind of come in there to be the extra person. And, well, again, Rietveld is an all-star for a reason. He's an all-star at guard. And going up against guys like that, that's just difficult for anybody to do. So this was, first and foremost, a very dominating day for the Queens defensive line, even before you get to guys like Pace or like Spence or anybody else who also had great games themselves. I mean, you look at Jared Seaway, 10.5 tackles from his field corner position and a forced fumble, that one that Pace took over. Brandon Spence with 6 tackles. This was just a very incredible performance here. Now, again, I don't want to, well, certainly if you're a Laurier fan, you're looking at this being like, okay, we made a lot of mistakes. We gave them the first half, and then we were storming back in the second half, whatever. To me, this is unbelievable plays on both sides. Like, you were in every position. You were in the correct position on like 90% of the time in the first half. Queens just made better plays. Like that punch out that I talked about that Seaway had, that Pace had. Pace's interception comes from, I believe, Capeye with a textbook tackle on what was going to be a running back screen to Tayshaun Jackson. Puts his helmet right on the ball. It pops up perfectly right to Pace, and he takes it in untouched to the end zone. Like, that's not Tayshaun Jackson not playing well. That is Queens playing at the very highest of level on defense. Like, it was just a blanket across. They were unbelievable. And then, yes, in the second half, Laurier finds their rhythm again. They were one of the most explosive offenses for a reason, and they're able to get into the end zone a few times. But again, going into the stat take that we kind of had here, if you're Queens, you're not necessarily going for, yeah, we're going to just continue to throw the ball deep downfield. It's, a bunch of times. Like, you have a sizable lead. Let's run the ball. Let's focus on killing the clock as best we can. That changes the game plan and the mindset going into the second half, which means that you're not gaining as many yards to just make sure that you're running the clock as best you can. So, again, don't look at the stats. They don't tell the story, but incredible performance on both sides, even if Laurier has had to come all in the second half.
And, we've given the nickname of November Hughes to, given Ryan Hughes the name of November Hughes. As far as a defensive guy who's starting to take that mantle over, obviously Pace on this day was phenomenal, but like this 2-game streak that Jacob Baldwin's been on now.
Yeah.
Coming off of that Windsor game of just being a one-man wrecking crew in that linebacking core, and then what should have been, the interception, and then what should have also been the pick six when the sniper gets him in the hamstring as he's, 10 yards from popping it into the end zone. But you point out really early, and this has been something that we've seen of Queens use this guy really effectively, is DJ Ryan being down on the line and using him as a 4-man front. And now partly you wonder, is that a product of, and this is where like Queens has the luxury, and it was cool talking to Taylor Elgersma before the game, getting his sort of read on these secondary players and just schematically how Coach Beckmanis sets his guys up for success in the defensive secondary. But, on the one hand, as I kept reflecting on this game, I'm like we haven't, even in talking about him winning the MVP, haven't recognized the fact that, again, Ethan Jordan was not up for this game. And that factors into a number of ways. On the one hand, like we said, it takes them out of some of those 5R sets. It brings Parcelidis into the game. On the one hand, maybe that helps your run game be able to get going a little bit more. But it allows Queens to be able to say, look, yeah, we'll play 4 down. We'll trust Pace. We'll trust Baldwin to patrol the middle. And then we can just create a no-fly zone over the top because we have some of the best cover guys. And again, alluding to a conversation we had with Taylor Elgersma, the way that they really play some deep zones and then just rally down to the ball, which was kind of funny. I wish I asked him the follow-up in saying that kind of sounds like how Arnaud Desjardins described your defense in many ways. The guys are just big time eyes in the backfield. And when Cal's getting uncomfortable, as you said, having to, not be able to set up some of those passes downfield, you're able to just rally down to the ball, and a tip ball here, a mistake there, a punch ball out one way or the other can turn into massive production for the defense.
Yeah, completely. I mean, when you already talk about, in the best of cases here, exactly like you said, what Taylor Elgersma told us, is that guys like Ashton Miller-Melanson, they play zone really, really effectively, in that they give something of a cushion to all these receivers as they're running routes, and then they have the break speed that it takes to get down as the ball is coming, or even to pick that thing off, because they're keeping everything in front of you. Now, for a younger defensive secondary, if you're doing something very similar, that can cause you to be susceptible to, a give and go kind of thing, where a receiver looks like he's going to break his route, and then he actually comes up and keeps going. But when you've got the entirety of this defensive secondary being as veteran as they are, they've seen that a number of times, and they know not to bite on something like that, and they can keep up with some of these top-tier receivers. Like, this was just a very dominant performance here. And to keep this going on the offensive side of things, I already gave my bit of a spiel on Alex Vreeken here, but I want to just continue, the amount of times it would have to be honestly 3 or 4 times in key scenarios. It's 2nd and 10, and the rush is coming after Vreekin, and he's taking off and running and finding guys for like an 11-yard gain or for an 8-yard gain, and then somebody goes up and gets to the first down. Like those plays were so pivotal, and Queens got them every single time, and that's what led them to more and more first downs, holding the clock and to eventual scores. And the guy that I want to make sure that we really shout out here is Jared Kasari. Because Kasari, while, yes, again, 15 attempts for 61 yards, the 3 catches for 53 yards, including the one 39-yard gain that he has, that 39-yard gain is in the third or fourth quarter, and Laurier has just scored, I believe, a couple of times. They are on the doorstep. If they can force another 3 and out here, they've got plenty of time to score again. And then Vreekin unbelievably gets away from the rush on the run, finds Kasari. Kasari breaks 2 or 3 tackles and knifes up the field, almost scoring himself before eventually being tackled. Like, each one of those plays were so pivotal into why Queens is now the Yates Cup champion in 2025.
And I think that was on a 2nd and long as well. The one to Jared Kasari, looking like Don Billingsley out here from Friday Night Lights at the end of just boom, bouncing off a defender, boom, bouncing off a defender. And really, they needed that spark, which to your point, I don't think was them not playing effectively. Maybe it was a little, maybe if you wanted to critique, maybe they went a little too conservative in the moment. But at the end of the day, like they did enough to get it done. And just going back to that pessimistic take on this, it's like, we knew Laurier was gonna come alive eventually. Like they like it, and like the take sort of refutes itself, where it's like, well, then if they stop making these mistakes, this is what you're gonna get. And it was nearly a miraculous comeback. Again, I'm completely gonna credit you for the take. I don't know if you had thought of it any further, but I want to throw this out to our community out here. You know, it's somewhat of a moot point given that they fell short of the comeback. But of course, as they're marching up and down the field, you quickly bring up that 2016 Yates and compare just what that would have been. And by comparison, again, perhaps a moot point, certainly a moot point, given that it didn't happen. You know, ifs and buts were candies and nuts and blah, 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 blah. Tom, I don't know. We've detailed it pretty great. I love that you brought up Jared Kasari. Again, it felt like the fact that they, you know, whether you want to call it conservative, you just had that feeling that eventually he's going to bust a big one out here. And it ended up coming in the passing game more so than on the ground. But that huge third down pickup was awesome. And we were kind of talking about, you know, like, well, do you not just kick the field goal? But then it's like, but then you're kicking off to Tayshaun Jackson, and that might be the most dangerous proposition. Might as well just pin him deep. Worst case scenario, trust your defense and just, you know, just let it fly elsewise. Last thoughts on this game. I mean, the pageantry. I mean, the lack of halftime show, perhaps. Again, you know, in-game entertainment. That was kind of fun, guys. You know, a kid in our section won a PS5. That's fun, I suppose. And we were detailing like we hail from a time when, you know, groups like, you know, Yukon Blonde and I think we were saying that the Trues or the Arkells maybe before had played some halftime shows, but, you know, put that aside. Just any last thoughts on this incredible Yates Cup we had?
Yeah, an incredible job. You already mentioned it, but Jacob Baldwin, what he was able to do in the 2 interception day that he had was incredible. Although that hamstring injury that he had that took him out of the game looked pretty severe. So hoping that he's okay, but I have to imagine that he's not going to be ready to go for these next 2 weeks here. But man, again, just a full, complete win by the entirety of this team. We talked about the offense and the defense. A guy that really impressed me was honestly Matt Driver. He had really struggled in the Windsor game. He did not have a lot of solid punts that put them into some rough scenarios here. He has, of his 8 punts, he kicks it 310 yards total, with 3 of them being inside the 20-yard line to start with Laurier on, you know, some of their biggest drives. And I think that his performance really helped and really put them in a good spot here. So with Tyler Mullen as well, 3 for 3 on his field goals, 3 for 3 on his extra points for a total of 12. Offense, defense, and special teams really played outstanding. Shout out to Coach McManus for an unbelievable day by his defense. Shout out to Coach Taggart, who has been playing outstanding special teams the entire year. And shout out to your boy and Coach Nesbitt for an incredible offensive game plan that obviously came to fruition. This was a three-faceted tier, and of course, none of that happens without Coach Steve Snyder. What he's been able to do at Queens, we detailed this before, but again, what he has done at Queens has been nothing short of amazing. And I'm so happy that all of these guys that we just mentioned, including all of the players, have capped this with a Yates Cup. Now, this is one of three total games that you really do need to win. And we'll get to the previews at a later podcast, but I do genuinely think that this Queens team can win their final two games of the season here. But an unbelievable job by the Queens Golden Gales.
It only took Kingston not hosting a Vanier for them to have a legitimate shot of
Yeah,
making
exactly.
there. Again, that's a Tom Sterling take. And just from the Guelph Griffins side of things, because, I'd be a sucker not to bring us into the equation, to the Queens Golden Gales, by the way, you're welcome, given you didn't have to see Western again. So I'll just, we'll take a little lap on this one as well. And for producing the quality coaches of Matt Nesbitt, Charlie Taggart, and the like. Let's go take a look at how their opponent in the upcoming Mitchell Bowl stamped their ticket to that game, which will take us out to the prairies, Saskatoon, the host of the 88th Hardy Cup, where by a single point, the Saskatchewan Huskies raise the Hardy Cup over the reigning champ Regina Rams 25-24. Tom, this was a game we're catching a good chunk of it in the car ride back to Hamilton from Kitchener-Waterloo. And this was as perfect a start to the game that the Rams could have wanted. Their defense came up to play. It's a bit of that rock fight, 2 and outs across the board. Sask gets the 3 points at the start. Regina ends up getting a few more to be able to take that lead going to halftime. But if you were going to chart out a day for Regina, with obviously them going back and forth this year from Peltier to Sieben, and Sieben's been really strong, and much like as we talked about with Ethan Jordan, having a guy like Sirleaf just is able to make whoever's job that much easier. But the fact that Erickson goes down, Katende is really strong. This defense, though, for the Huskies is so great, and their offense is super explosive. The fact that this first half not only had it seems silly to say it, but less important than the fact that they ended up getting ahead the way they did, the fact that it was just this tight defensive battle, that's all you could have asked for from Regina. And then they got that much more by getting some of those big plays out of Sieben to connect with some of his receivers, including guys like Nicholas Sirleaf.
Yeah, this was incredible. You talk about what losing a guy like Marshall Erickson was going to do to you. And of course, Christian Katende is a great running back. But on the day, he finishes 14 attempts for just 37 rushing yards. That's where that outstanding defense for Saskatchewan comes to play. And Seth Hundeby, he was all over the field with a number of tackles. But I don't think you can overstate how impressive Nicholas Sirleaf was in this game as well. 7 catches for 74 yards. At times, it seemed like Owen Sieben was just throwing up the ball to him, and he was just coming down with it. There's a reason why Sirleaf was such an incredible receiver the entirety of this year, and his work ethic and the talent that he has was on full display here. Let's not forget that this was a Regina Rams team that held the lead in this Hardy Cup for 50 total game minutes of the 60 minutes that we have, if not more. It was just in the dying moments here that Saskatchewan was able to hit the field goal and get up here. But this was just an incredible job on both sides. Again, we talk about great running back play that like Jarek Kasari, Riker Frank, 22 attempts for 102 yards, and also leading receiver with 6 catches and 81 yards on the day. What he does for this offense, like Daniel Weeb, is so incredible. And with Anton Ammonroot out, they are certainly committing to running the ball a little bit more often than they normally would. And Frank has just took that on like nothing else has happened. He is such a dynamic player and has done such an incredible job. And he's just doing anything and everything that this offense has kind of been asking of him. It was really impressive to see him do his thing.
So much good stuff you said there. This very much made me think like this had the feeling of the again Laurier came those 3 points short of tying it and four of making that comeback happen. But what was just so impressive to me is that not only does Regina get up early and Sirleaf again is having an incredible outing, and you add in as well what Sokol and Sens are doing, Sokol and what Sens are doing as well for that passing attack, with again the rushing game really not getting going, a couple of key plays on special teams. And this is where again a guy like Scott Flory ends up winning Coach of the Year, where you not only have that, you then have the snap that goes over Farrell's head, like on one of their first drives of the second half, that, he slides in to get it and bobbles it again. And there's Brandon Wong scooping and scoring it to put them ahead, whatever it was at that time. And Sask doesn't blink for a second. And the just inevitability that they were going to get their stuff back in order and being able to march down the field. And the reason I love you highlighted how effective Frank was in the passing game as well is that, like, I forget who it was. We were talking to somebody at the Yates yesterday before the game, and we're kind of talking about the Heck Crichton nominees, and then they're talking about Arnaud Desjardins. They said, I loved how they put it, where they're like, shoot, maybe I'm just mixing up. Maybe this was our conversation with Coach Saria, but of like frame it as his superpower is being willing to take those checkdowns and not make silly plays. And it's all well and good, to be able to, especially as a young guy, Farrell, playing behind Anson, playing behind, I think his first year might have been Nias's last. I can't remember exactly. But the fact that you're behind and that he's still willing to say, again, not only am I not going to go for these major big bombs, we got to get back in it. And we made maybe the catch of the weekend with a ball that was possibly on its way into a Regina Rams defender hand, if not for him doing the full extension, reaching back for that thing, putting the two mitts on it over, like it might have been right at the 55 as well. I'm just going to say it was at the 55 anyways. Obviously gets bailed out by Weeb on one of those deep shots, but the fact that they just trusted in who they had, knowing that they have a guy like Frank who just needs the ball in his hands, knowing that you can take some shots to Weeb, and they didn't feel rushed for a second with how good Regina's defense was. And the fact that they were playing against the clock, I thought was so doggone impressive with a young quarterback. And to me, again, that all comes back to Coach Flory and why he's taken home the award for the best coach the conference has to offer.
Yeah, I mean, what he's able to do, what he has been doing with the Saskatchewan team ever since he got the job here. I mean, getting a guy like a Mason Nias to come to your squad first, like a number of years ago, obviously, and the recruiting that has been done here. And even this idea on, I'll never forget having a conversation with him at the East West and just saying, like, we are a spread offense team. I asked my running backs to be able to catch the ball as well as run. If you cannot catch as a running back, I will not recruit you. And said that about Isaiah Knight, unbelievable running back for UBC, being like, listen, he's a fantastic pure runner for sure, but because he can't catch, he does not fit in our offense, and I'm not going to waste my time trying to recruit a guy like that. Whereas you see how dynamic and how incredible Riker Frank is in this offense because he has the ability to catch and because of what his hands look like. Now, obviously, with Mason Nias, and I've spoke glowingly about this guy for a number of reasons, and I think anybody who's watching Saskatchewan Huskies football can see why the development of this offense and I don't want to say simplification of it, but the refinement of this offense and the idea of you take a guy like an Anton Ammonroot who was throwing as many interceptions as touchdowns last year, and he hasn't thrown a single one. And now Jake Farrell, obviously being in this game, doesn't throw a single interception to a Regina Rams team that is known for their great defense with guys like Brandon Wong, Tachuk back there. Like, there's a number of really great defenders here, and the fact that he was smart with the football the entire game was really incredible to see. And yeah, like you mentioned, at one point in time, with 3 minutes left in the third quarter, Regina is up 24-9, and Saskatchewan doesn't panic at all. They stick to their guns, and they end up coming away 25-24 as the final here. Like, that's an incredible feat. And even if you want to go a little bit further, that defense doesn't give up a single point in the second half. And that's exactly what they needed, because that snap over the head came from the offense, obviously. That's exactly what was needed when you're down in crunch time like this. And my goodness, this was an incredible win by the Saskatchewan Huskies to secure another Hardy Cup.
It's championship moxie is what it is. Obviously, a great day for Saskatchewan football fans in general, where uh, I don't know my cardinal directions well in Saskatchewan, but over at Mosaic, of course, the Rough Riders come up with a big win to punch
Hmm.
their ticket to the Grey Cup. I know we have our thoughts on the way that the seasons don't line up and could be doing a better job of that, but like what a great time it is right now for Saskatchewan football fans. And yeah, really just those aspects he said about how they just looked across at those Rams and didn't blink for a second, I thought was so darn impressive. Yeah, any last thoughts on this one, Tom?
Yeah, just a really impressive performance in all aspects for Saskatchewan. Obviously, a number of mistakes that allowed Regina to capitalize on and get them the as many points as they did here. But when they're operating on all cylinders, this is why the Huskies came out of one of the most top to bottom impressive and competitive conferences in the Can West. But if this is a Queens Gales team that's going out there, they are going to need to play damn near perfect football if they want to come out away and go to Regina for the Vanier.
Well, that will be the Mitchell Bowl that we'll be setting up next week. Let's take our talents to the eastern portion of the country to look at how our two contenders for the UTEC Bowl found their way there. Let's start off in Nova Scotia for the 2025 Loney Bowl, where the St. Mary's Huskies pick up the massive win against St. FX, 46-11. Tom, we were talking about the weather all weekend in Ontario. Now, if I were to tell you that going into this matchup, St. Mary's and St. FX, it being in Halifax, and we saw just the difference. And like it was a tight win the first time these teams matched up in the regular season. The one from Antigonish, still a tight win by St. FX nonetheless. Completely different type of ball game when it was in Halifax. But if I were to tell you, just based on everything we've seen about these teams, with that stingy defense for St. Mary's, with Liam Legg, with Malik Williams running the ball so effectively for them, and St. FX being when they're at their most potent, yes, they have Malcolm Bussey, yes, they have Caleb Fogarty, but it's Fagnon and those receivers, no Ben Harrington in this one as well. But if I were to tell you on top of all that, it's going to be a dark and stormy and wet and rainy day, this might have been the outcome. Like we were picking St. Mary's all the way, but it might have been, it could get ugly.
Yeah, not only it's wet and rainy, St. Mary's is the number one rushing team in the AUS. And on top of all of that, Owen Wattrich, your star defensive player, is out for the game. He did not play in
Oh,
this game at all. Yeah, this was a recipe for disaster from as soon as the ball was snapped, and that's exactly why the final score is 46-11 here. And again, stats don't tell the full story. You look at this, St. Mary's only has 367 total yards of offense, including only 95 on the ground. But Malik Williams, despite only getting 22 yards, has 3 touchdowns on the day because he's getting the ball at like the 5 yard line and just powering his way through. Liam Legg with 58 rushing yards and a touchdown himself. I mean, one of the most impressive stats on the day from not just a number standpoint, but purely because of how much it was raining, is the fact that Joshua Jack, receiver for St. Mary's, finishes with 4 catches for 130 yards. Yes, there was a big 82-yard catch in there that really brings that number up, but still, the fact that they were able to throw the ball effectively in what was a monsoon, it looked like out there, or really just rainy weather, just is a huge testament to St. Mary's and what they were able to do.
and the Joshua Jack play was honestly so cool because St. Mary's gets, or St. FX pins St. Mary's deep off of a punt, and they're on like their 8 yard line or something like that. And Coach Samara says, all right, hey, we've been handing it off to Legg. We've been handing it off to Williams. Guess what we're going to do? All right, let's hit Jack over the middle. He takes it the rest of the way, gets pulled down, setting them up with great field position. And then I forget which touchdown it was that followed that one up. Some great job, some great performances on the special teams units, a couple big punt returns for them. Just across the board, a really effective day. And the defense as well obviously came to play across the board. Now, if only because we didn't mention it, I didn't bring it up when we were going through the numbers, just to give a little bit of shine to St. FX football. The Wattrich President's Nominee Award, President's Trophy winner for the AUS and a nominee for all of USports. put him in some pretty historic territory with the year he had in specific. We didn't take a moment to sort of highlight it, and as you mentioned, not in this game, but let's at least talk about the sort of just truly what it was, because obviously it's in some regards like, how isn't a guy like Callan Edwards for St. Mary's the most outstanding defensive player? How isn't a guy like Ryan Butler the most outstanding player for the AUS? How isn't a guy like, I'm forgetting one of their pass rushers who had a really strong year for them?
Coley?
Say again?
Coley?
Possibly, but
Yeah.
Watrick having a massive year for St. FX.
Yeah, his final stat line in the 8-game regular season, 73 and a half total tackles, 1 sack, 5.5 tackles for loss, and 2 forced fumbles and a pass breakup. The 73 and a half is unbelievable, especially when he breaks the AUS single season record by Henoch Mwamba by almost 10 full tackles. That is unbelievable what Owen Watrich was doing for St. FX and just all over the field at any given point. Really incredible, and was a staple on that defense for obvious reasons. And to not have him in this game, man, that's like a death sentence here because of how effective St. Mary's is, especially on the ground and when they're scoring touchdowns here. But you see Zachary Oud with 4 catches for 70 yards. I mean, it was always going to be a tough day for Silas in the rain here, but 21 for 39, 260 yards, no touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. If I was going to tell you there was going to be 2 quarterbacks in the conference championship games that were each going to throw 4 interceptions, I thought that would be crazy. But shout out to Coach Gavin Lake, defensive coordinator for St. Mary's. What he's been doing for the past number of years, and especially this year, has been unbelievable. And how well this team has played from top to bottom. This is a dominant victory in St. Mary's first Loney Bowl championship in a very long time.
And I got to meet Coach Lake briefly during my time in London and helping coach at London South. And, you know, again, you look at what makes this defense specifically so effective. I mean, Shibley obviously comes from Ottawa before, just as well as time with the Ravens, but a lot of guys coming out of the GTA, a couple of guys from the Oshawa area. So again, a guy like Coach Lake, who even as that top guy is still, or top defensive guy is still on the road trying to bring guys into the program. And obviously the thing that, when you talk to folks around the Carleton area, what they always talk about was Samara's best quality, above play calling, above X's and O's, is that recruiting leadership piece. Very much in the same way people will talk about Coach Faulds, that like, not that either of them are incompetent by any means or remotely close at those other aspects, but the culture building piece is the thing that they do so well. And, you know, again, we'll get to our breakdown of the UTech Bowl later on this week. But a St. Mary's team, as you mentioned, winning their first Loney in, was it 15 years, 2010?
I believe so, yeah.
A little while for them. Well, I mean, I might just be crazy enough to pick them breaking another AUS streak that's been going on. But we'll get to that later this week. We still have one more matchup to get to tell us who's taking on those Huskies in the 2025 UTech Bowl. And it was in the inaugural Dussault Cup from Stade de l'Est in Quebec City, where the Laval Rouge et Or fall to their rivals, the Montreal Carabins. Montreal 31, Laval 29. I mean, Tom, we keep playing this whole, if I had told you X, Y, and Z was going to happen, would you have believed me going into it? Not only if I had told you that maybe this is the thing, that the Coupe Dunsmore was always just going to be the rock fight that RCQ football is. Dussault Cup now is going to be all of a sudden a bit more high flying, high scoring action out of here. But not just the scoring, more specifically with these 2 iterations of these teams. If I were to tell you that Montreal would rush for 120 yards to Laval's 57 in this game right now, you'd call me silly, you'd call me ridiculous, and then to say that Montreal, to say, you know, that, well, no, I guess, yeah, that's what would have happened, that Montreal would have won. Incredible job by them establishing the ground game. Pepe, obviously young guy in his first championship game here, putting up some great numbers. As you talked about, that receiving core is getting healthier towards the end of the season. This is a box score one for us, folks. We couldn't find this game online. TVA got to find a way to get access to that. But Tom, just your impressions based on all the things that the great conversation you had with Tam from the Montanard and just from what we've seen all year long with these two clubs.
Well, very similar in regards to how this game kind of finished and the scoring aspect of it to their first game against Laval when they won the game, in that they had a monstrous quarter in that second quarter, scoring 21 unanswered points. To go up 21-8 at halftime here and just doing enough to keep in the game. And obviously, as I was speaking to Tam over the weekend after the game, it was a little bit closer than they would have wanted because Laval scores 21 compared to their 10 in the second half here. But again, the final score is 31-29. And of course, when the score is so close, you look at all aspects here. But the rouge that Laval has to settle with in the first quarter instead of a field goal because of the missed field goal, by only losing by 2. If they get that one field goal, it's at least a tie game going into this one, and that your heart just breaks for that young man. But still, what an incredible performance by the Carabin. And you look at Pepe Gonzalez in his first year and his first ever Dussault Cup, 27 for 37, 288 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That is an unbelievable stat line to see. Not only are you in the conference championship, you're in the conference championship against Laval, one of the best defenses consistently here, and to do those kind of numbers. And a huge aspect of that are his receivers that are there. Henrique James Leclerc, 11 catches for 136 yards, and Hassan Dosso, 7 catches for 89 yards. What an incredible showcase here by the young man in the passing game. And we still haven't talked about how effective they were in the run game against Laval, which just doesn't happen.
Yeah, like again, this is a defense anchored by the President's Trophy nominee in Justin Cloutier and a guy who is, to my understanding, is getting some looks. Just to my understanding, to the extent that I have any decent French ability in listening to the broadcast, but Yohan Myong, who might be getting some looks south of the border as well as a prospect for the NFL, is certainly an outstanding day for them on the whole. And like, this is the thing though, and you kind of mentioned with Arnaud winning the MVP that like he had a bit of a quiet second half to the season. It felt like in a number of games, including in their win against McGill last week, it didn't take to the second half, but the offense didn't quite get rolling, right away off the jump. And you could arguably say the same thing about their defense. Again, McGill has that explosive start to that game, going up 2 scores on them. And the fact that this is back-to-back weeks, yes, Laval goes up in this one, but you go into half 21-8. It's a weird thing to see out of the Laval team. Again, I threw that out to you. I'm sure we could do it with a pretty quick Google search. How many times Constantin has been awarded Coach of the Year in the RSEQ? Like, I'm not in any shape or form, like, again, a question that in some regards. In a regards, it may just be the teensy tiniest little bit of maybe a Vanier Cup hangover in some regards, that like you feel so bullish on the things that you do arguably better than anyone else, and maybe it turns into a little bit, again, we're saying this all without having seen any of the game film. This is such conjecture, it's not even funny. So but like that piece on like maybe you're waiting for that other person to make the big play to wake things up a little bit. We kind of go through all the things of like, would you believe me if? I mean, again, like Mathieu Roy, I love that it's 55 yards, but on 12 attempts on there, Angel Vital only gets the ball twice for 6 yards. And part of that might just be the product that Desjardins has to throw it 4 times as a kind of try and dig them out of the hole. But on the flip side, maybe that reveals some of the things that, again, made Sask so effective in still being able to claw out. I mean, I guess Mathieu Roy also gets 12 receptions, so I can't say that they weren't still playing the little dink and dunk game that they were doing. I don't know. Again, without the film, I'm sure I sound like an idiot right now, and that much more so to our fans tuning in from La Belle Provence. But again, a surprise if for none other than the fact that you would have thought that the home field advantage would have been enough to, if you were going to say the game swung by 2 points one way or the other, it's like that has the making of the home field advantage comes in true on that one. But hopefully, I think the individual that was posting all the games was a Laval person. Tough loss for your squad, but come on, we still want to see it. We still want to see it.
Yeah, an incredible game that I'm very much looking forward to watching at some point in time. Obviously, we weren't able to do that before we had to record here for all of you lovely people. But I just can't get over the fact one of the most impressive feats here and doesn't really stick out all that much when you look at everything that was happening here. But the fact that Montreal was able to rush for 120 yards on the ground, Lucas Diembe 9 attempts for 68 yards. Like that it just doesn't happen against Laval. Laval's front seven has always been so stout, and I don't know if it's just Coach Constantine, obviously being from that front seven himself, being like, yeah, you're just not going to be able to run the ball on us. I hate anybody that can run the ball. We're just not going to allow it. The fact that they were still able to get that done, along with Pepe's incredible performance here, is a huge reason, I'm sure, why they were able to win this game and to come out with that. So an unbelievable job by Montreal to go into the teeth of a Laval defense and a Laval team in Quebec City, outnumbered 3-1 in terms of their fans. I'm sure 23,000 fans. There's probably 5,000 Montreal fans, if that, there. And just an incredible job by the Carabins to win this game.
Allez les bleus, allez les bleus, allez les bleus. But they have a tough trip on their hands to Halifax if they want to get back to the Vanier Cup for the first time since 2023. Tom, final thoughts on the conference championship weekend, one to remember for sure, and a Yates Cup that we were so privileged to be in the house for. Final thoughts from all the great action of Canadian football we saw this weekend. Also, hey, condolences to your Ticats.
Ugh.
Not really, but
Yeah.
for you at least a little heart goes out.
Well, just means that I'm 100% cheering for the Rough Riders going into this great cup.
100%.
100%. But anyways, an incredible weekend of Canadian football. And if I can just sneak in a little bit here too, my Assumption Crusaders won the Halton Championships as well.
Yeah,
So excited
don't
to see
sneak
that.
at all. Go off, King.
Yeah, outstanding to be able
Horns
to say that. Horns down, absolutely. But it was just such an incredible weekend. I had the most fun seeing it with you, my friend, as I always do. You're one of my favorite people in the world to watch football with. Such a beautiful man you are. But what a weekend of football. You have 3 games that are decided by a grand total of what? 6 points? And that is just purely, as a football fan, what more could you want? That is exactly what you're hoping for. And we are dialing up for some phenomenal games. It's been a little while here, and I think we will obviously get into a little bit more of it when we do the preview. But this is the first time in a little while where I'm looking at everything being like, there's not a clear cut, oh, this person's 100% going to win the Vanier Cup this year. We've got a lot of really great storylines going into this one. And on paper, at least, one of the best opportunities potentially for a team from the AUS to make it back to the Vanier Cup. We'll have to break all that down for you later on, but there's a little sneak peek in there.
Oh, one of us might just be crazy enough to do it, but Tom, that's a beautiful job wrapping it all up. I can't wait to set up those national semifinal games with you. I can't wait then to be sitting with you here at the castle with my old man, checking out those games later on this week, right here at the 55.